Hey, it's Sophie Margot. As you may know, I make embroidery art. This piece I've been working on for over a year, and I finally finished it earlier this year, like a month or so ago. So I wanted to show you the entire process from finishing stitching to framing the piece, so that you know how to frame your pieces too. So the first step is washing it out. I used a blue washable marker to mark my pattern on the fabric. So I like to be very thorough with making sure I get that all out. If you've stained your fabric or left any oils, you might want to use a mild soap to wash that out too. And then I wrap it all up in a little towel. I don't exactly know why I roll it like this, but I think I read it or saw it somewhere that someone else rolled up their embroideries like this, just while they were getting set up with blocking. So blocking is the next step. While your fabric's still wet, you want to use either a piece of wood. I use a cork board that's wrapped in a piece of fabric, and I pin down my piece to this board, and I let it sit overnight until the entire thing is completely dry. But the point of blocking is to get rid of all those little wrinkles. Do you see, especially around the more dense areas of stitching, you'll get all of these little ripples, wrinkle ripples in your fabric. So this is a way to stretch out your fabric so that as it dries, it remembers how it was stretched out. So you'll see I'm starting in the corners. I like to start in the corners, then go to the middle of the sides with my pins. That way I can get the piece sort of evenly stretched. Like if you've ever stretched a canvas over stretcher bars, you want to make sure you're evenly stretching the fabric so it's not skewed one way or another. And you'll see that I completely was not recording most of that pinning process, so I apologize for that. But you can see what it looks like when I'm basically done pinning everything. And then I go around and I, adjust it, stretch it a little bit in places that might still have wrinkles, until it's perfectly flat. Okay, so now here is the part where we prep for actually framing. So you could do this while your piece is drying. You need 2 pieces of felt. One is going to be directly behind your embroidery piece, and the other one is going to be sewn onto the back of your framed hoop. So I just use markers again to mark this circle that I need to cut out for the back of the hoop. I like to use the inner hoop to measure the circle. The one that's going directly behind the embroidery, you don't really need to cut out. We'll trim that down later once we get into the framing portion. So take your time when you're cutting out the circle. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, because you will be sewing around the edge of this, so you won't necessarily see any major imperfections once it's sewn up. But you want it to be the right size. You want it to be big enough. So, and you'll see I'm just going back and trimming up some little areas that were a little wonky, and checking it with the inner hoop frame. And something I started doing maybe a year or two ago was was adding a little label to the back of my larger embroidery pieces that have my name on them. Oh, this is where I used to keep all of the numbers of all of the embroidery floss that I used for all my projects. Now I keep them in my patterns, but yeah, these are my little custom labels that I got made. They're so cute, and I sew them onto that felt circle that I'm going to put on the back of my embroidery hoop. So here you see I'm just pinning it, trying to figure out which side to do it. I like to pin it right in the middle with some very long, I love these quilting pins with little glass heads. They're so nice. They're very flexible and long, so they help with a lot of my different kinds of sewing projects. And here you can see me setting up my sewing machine for a zigzag stitch. I like to make the zigzags a little bit closer and a little bit wider so it captures the entire edge of that label. It ends up looking really cute and clean, and I think they're so cute. I used to only sign the bottom of the hoop with like a permanent marker or something like that, but I like that this is a little more customized. It has my logo on it, and it just makes it feel more legit. I don't know. I like it a lot. And I don't know about you, but I love painting my hoops. I don't think I've ever left one of my embroidery hoops just the regular wood color. I think it makes it so much more custom and personalized when you paint them. So this one I'm going to make more Beetlejuice themed, of course, to go with the house. So I'm just going for like a plain black and white striped pattern. But I like to kind of match the paint of the hoop normally to colors in the piece or something that's slightly contrasting with the fabric. I end up doing a few layers of this just to make sure that it's nice and opaque, and I leave time for it to dry in between the different layers. And it's good to make sure you go back over it to make sure you didn't leave any big lumps of paint. I usually use acrylic for this kind of thing because it dries fast, and I know it doesn't necessarily need a clear coat or anything on top, but it would look good with one. So here I am sort of taping off little sections with my blue painter's tape so that I can make stripes, the little sandworm stripes. So I'm painting black in those exposed areas and being careful to not push paint underneath the pieces of tape. So I'm kind of painting away from the tape. You'll see that most of them peel pretty clean, but some of them I did have to go back and touch up, just because a little bit of paint leaked underneath in some places. Alright, so now we're getting to the best part, which is actually putting everything together. I'm unpinning my embroidery piece. My nails are gone because I filmed this over a couple of days. And I'm just cleaning up any little dust or little dog hairs off of it and getting ready to put it in the frame. So I put the inner hoop down first. I laid that piece of uncut felt over top of it, and then I'm positioning my embroidery piece on top of that. And you can see I'm kind of checking to make sure it's centered over that hoop. Sometimes this takes a couple of tries because, you know, fabric is slippery. Everything's kind of slippery. And since you're adding that extra layer of felt, you need to let out the outer hoop a little bit more sometimes, just because it's a lot of material in between those two pieces of wood. But you can see I'm adjusting it. I push the inner frame towards me a little bit to give it a little bit of dimension. It kind of pops out of the frame that way. And I'm tugging on the fabric around the hoop in different places to make sure that it's laying flat and that it is centered. And then we can tighten the screw at the top. I definitely like to be a perfectionist when it comes to getting this part right, because once we gather the fabric in the back and then sew the other piece of felt onto the back to close it up, it's kind of annoying to open it back up again to readjust. So really take your time with this. Take it completely out of the hoop again if it's not where you want it to be exactly. Sometimes I do this multiple times because I just want it to be perfect. Okay, so now we flip it over. I have two different kinds of scissors. I have regular sharp fabric scissors that I use just for fabric, and then I have pinking shears. So all I'm doing is trimming away that excess felt very carefully, because you don't want to accidentally cut through your fabric. That would suck. And then I'm just trimming away some of the excess fabric around the hoop, just so the back isn't super bulky. Oh my gosh, please don't look at my nails. In this shot, they're awful. But here I am, I'm just taking some regular thread. I've found that using regular like polyester or synthetic, some kind of synthetic thread is the best choice when closing up the back. Mainly because when you sew with embroidery floss or something like that, it's not as strong as these synthetic threads are for this kind of application, at least. So I'm really just doing a running stitch, gathering this fabric in the back. It doesn't have to look pretty because no one's gonna see it, but it's mainly just to keep it gathered and out of the way. And I like to leave a good amount of fabric on the back in case, you know, some future person who has this piece in their possession, if they want to reframe it or put it into like a traditional kind of square frame, they have some extra fabric to work with. And they have options for other kinds of framing. If you take something like this to any professional framer, they should know how to frame an embroidery. I know because my mom was a framer. Okay, so I skipped the pinning this piece on the back, but essentially you just want to loosely pin that backing fabric, that backing felt, onto the back of your piece. I do it in like 4 pins, and then slowly go around and stitch it to that fabric. Nothing too complicated, just a little tedious. I try to keep these stitches pretty uniform, but sometimes that's hard to do, so just take your time, and you might run out of thread halfway through like I did here, and I just tie a little knot, well, a couple little knots, and then I push the needle through so that I can hide the end of that thread inside and clip it. Here's like an up-close shot of me tying off the thread at the very end. You can see I make a couple knots. And then I just run that needle inside through the felt, bring it back out the top, and trim it close to the felt. And here's how it turned out. I'm so happy with this piece. I'm so glad that I actually finally finished it. It was like once I got to the background, when I finished stitching the house, I was so tired of it. But I'm glad I finally pushed through and finished it. I think it looks so cool. If you're interested in making one for yourself, I sell the pattern PDF for this. And I also sell the original piece. See you later. Bye.